Hey everyone, so this next story may sound like it comes straight out of science fiction or the X-Files, but I assure you the bizarre account you're about to hear is 100% true and accurate as told to me. It starts off following a normal, ordinary guy going about his everyday life in Montana, but it quickly takes a turn into the unbelievable and crazy once he starts to learn the backstory. By the end, you'll be questioning everything you think you know about the world around us. So saddle up and get comfortable because you are about to go on one hell of a ride. It was an ordinary Tuesday night in late October when Tom Jenkins's life took an extraordinary turn. Tom was a 34-year-old insurance adjuster living in the small town of Willow Creek, Montana. He enjoyed his quiet life and routine of going to work, spending time with his wife and young daughter, and occasionally fishing on the weekends. That Tuesday, Tom was driving home from the office around 7 p.m. when something caught his eye up ahead on the deserted country road. At first he thought maybe a deer had wandered into the road, but as he got closer, he realized it was something much larger and stranger. There in the middle of the road was an enormous creature, easily 8 feet tall, with a bulky body covered in thick, grayish fur. Its arms were muscular and hung down almost to its knees. The thing's head was elongated like a horse or canine, but with 2 beady black eyes spaced far apart. As Tom's headlights illuminated the bizarre sight, the creature turned and looked directly at his approaching car. Tom instinctively hit the brakes, his tires screeching as the car skidded to a stop about 30 feet from the thing. His heart was pounding out of his chest. The creature took a few lumbering steps toward the stopped car, sniffing the air with its equine snout. Tom didn't know whether to floor it and speed past or throw the car in reverse and get the hell out of there. He sat paralyzed, gripping the steering wheel tightly, but eventually, the creature seemed to lose interest. It turned away from Tom's car and lumbered off into the trees lining the side of the road. Tom watched it go, its massive body easily crashing through the underbrush. He couldn't quite believe what he had just witnessed. When Tom finally arrived home 15 minutes later, he was still visibly shaken. His wife Sarah immediately knew something was wrong. Tom described to her in detail the grotesque, hair-covered creature he had encountered on the road. Sarah listened intently, but had a hard time comprehending what Tom was telling her, and they sort of just moved on. Except that Tom couldn't let it go. That weekend, Tom decided to go back to the area where he had seen the creature to look for any physical evidence like footprints or broken branches, or anything at all to help him figure it out. He felt crazy even doing it, as the whole encounter seemed more and more like some kind of dream the more time passed. When he got to the spot on the rural highway, Tom pulled over and got out to scan the surrounding wooded area. At first, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but then something caught his eye. A large tuft of grayish fur stuck in the brambles along the tree line. Tom carefully made his way over and examined the clumps of coarse hair. They were easily 6 inches long and thicker than any animal fur he had seen. He gingerly pulled a few tufts free and stuffed them into a plastic bag from his pocket. Energized by this discovery of physical proof, Tom headed back toward his car, scanning the woods on either side of the road. That's when he saw it, a large, bare patch of earth beneath the trees where it looked like something massive had been bedding down. The entire area was matted down and free of underbrush or vegetation. There were deep, grooved trails leading away from it in 2 directions. Tom knew something didn't seem right about this, and he decided that he needed to tell someone else about it, to get another perspective. He thought about going to the police, but something stopped him. They would likely just dismiss everything, and he needed to find someone who would take this seriously. Tom spent the next few days scouring the internet, trying to find accounts of similar encounters or information about whatever type of creature he had run across. On one particular forum, Tom came across a user who went by Truthseeker432 and had posted dozens of long threads meticulously documenting alleged sightings of strange creatures across North America over the past few decades. Many of the sightings matched what Tom had witnessed: a massive, upright, hair-covered beast with an elongated head and snout. Truthseeker 432 referred to the creature as a dogman and theorized it was an unknown species of wild canine that had evolved alongside humans and Native American tribes for centuries. Tom made the decision to private message Truthseeker and recount in extensive detail his own encounter a couple weeks prior in Montana. To his surprise, Truthseeker quickly responded and seemed to take Tom's story very seriously. The anonymous user claimed to be just one of a handful of amateur researchers, desperate to document proof of the dogman's existence before the government was able to cover it all up. Truthseeker mentioned whisperings and unconfirmed reports of personnel from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service being engaged in operations to track and capture living dogman specimens in remote areas of forests and national parks. The reason, according to Truthseeker's theories, was because the creature represented an extreme biological risk to humans, an apex predator unlike any other on the planet. The government couldn't allow concrete evidence of its existence to become public knowledge. In subsequent messages, Truthseeker claimed to have a credible source, someone who had been involved in the government's secretive tracking operations in the past. This source insisted the creature displayed evidence of human-level intelligence at times and worked in highly coordinated packs when hunting its prey. There had even been alleged confrontations between these dogman packs and wildlife services teams in the past, with casualties on both sides. The more Tom read Truthseeker's writings and personal communications, the more intrigued and disturbed he became. Had he really stumbled across something the U.S. government was so desperate to keep under wraps? He knew it sounded crazy, but Tom was convinced he had encountered one of these dogmen up close on that country road outside Willow Creek. And from Truthseeker's accounts, merely having that kind of encounter may have put Tom himself at major risk. Tom ran his fingers through the tuft of thick, grayish fur he had collected from the woods. The only physical proof to confirm his encounter was real. He felt conflicted about what to do next. Every instinct told him to mind his own business and move on with his quiet life. But a larger part of him felt compelled to continue seeking the truth, no matter how unbelievable it seemed. Tom knew he had come face to face with something unnatural, something not of this world, and the government was potentially engaged in an elaborate cover-up to hide its existence from the public. Tom felt he owed it to himself and others to not let this sighting go undocumented. No matter what he would uncover, Tom was determined to find out more. Through various sources, Tom began to piece together what sounded like a conspiracy that stretched back decades. There were numerous documented cases from the 1960s through 1990s of strange wolf-like or Bigfoot-type creatures being sighted in remote areas of national forests and Native American reservations. However, anytime legitimate scientists or researchers attempted to seriously study the phenomena, they seemed to quickly encounter harassment and roadblocks from shadowy government operatives. So, on a warmer than usual night in late November, Tom was driving along the empty country road. His phone began ringing. Looking down, he saw a call from an unknown number. Before Tom could pick up, his car was suddenly bathed in bright lights from behind. He glanced up to see an enormous military-style truck had appeared out of nowhere and was rapidly approaching his rear bumper. Tom's heart sank as he realized he may have been discovered and exposed. Had the government caught on to his poking around? As the truck pulled alongside him, Tom caught a terrifying glimpse of a pair of soldiers dressed in full combat gear, weapons raised in his direction through the truck's tinted windows that were half down. Tom's mind raced as the military truck loomed beside him. He knew if they were willing to make such a brazen move to confront him, the stakes had risen dramatically. Tom floored the gas pedal, whipping his car across the center line and kicking up gravel as he sped off in the opposite direction at full speed. In his rearview mirror, he could see the truck had slammed on its brakes and was turning around to give chase. Tom pushed his car to its limits, zipping around curves and praying he wouldn't encounter any other vehicles. After several harrowing miles of turning onto side roads, the truck's headlights finally shrank from view behind him. Somehow, he had lost them. Tom didn't slow down until he reached the outskirts of the nearest town 20 miles away. Pulling into a deserted parking lot, he killed his headlights and tried to collect his wits. His phone buzzed again from the unknown number. He hesitated to answer, but couldn't resist knowing who it was. It was Truth Seeker 432, using an unknown number. With trembling hands, Tom answered and listened as the distorted voice warned him the situation had become incredibly dangerous. They had been compromised. Tom needed to get off the grid immediately before the government tracked him down again. As much as Tom wanted to continue pursuing the truth about the dogmen and the cover-up, he realized his first priority needed to be ensuring his wife and daughter's safety. He couldn't risk leading any trouble back to them. Tom knew he needed to cut all ties, at least temporarily, from his contacts and cease his research going forward. It crushed him, but it was the smart play for survival. The next morning, Tom quit his job and gave no explanation. He packed up his car with essentials and a lump sum of cash from his savings account. As the sunrise peeked over the hilltops, Tom got his family into the car and drove away from Willow Creek, leaving his entire life behind to escape with his freedom intact. He was heartsick about cutting himself off, but thrilled to have evaded the government forces who seemed desperate to apprehend him. Tom knew this wasn't the last he would hear of the creatures or the cover-up, however. It was only a matter of time before their paths crossed again, and next time he would be ready to risk everything for sharing the truth with the world. It was the fall of 2021 and just another ordinary evening for Park Ranger Tom Wagner as he headed out on his nightly patrol through Shawnee State Forest in southern Ohio near the border with Kentucky. Tom had worked this region for 16 years now and had no intentions of ever leaving. He loved the forest and hoped to work in it until retiring. The particular section he was assigned to that night covered the most isolated, secluded area of the massive forest, a place few ventured into due to its remoteness. As the sun began setting over the trees, Tom made his way down one of the longest straightaways that cut through the heart of the forest's interior. His truck's headlights illuminated the narrow dirt path ahead, scanning the thick woods on either side. About a mile in, something started jumping around in the middle of the road ahead. At first, he thought maybe a hiker or hunter was out after dark, but as he got closer, he realized that this was nothing like that at all. There, lumbering right down the center of the road, was some kind of beast. Not huge, but about 5 feet tall and hunched over, it appeared to have a stout, bulky frame covered from head to toe in fur. As Tom slowly approached in his truck, he could make out its arms, long and strangely proportioned. When the thing turned to face the approaching truck, Tom was able to see its head, an elongated snout filled with wicked teeth, almost like that of a wild animal. Immediately, Tom pulled his truck to a stop about 20 yards away, putting it in park. He just sat there, dumbfounded at the sight before him. This thing didn't look like any bear, coyote, or other forest creature he had ever seen before. Its awkward, almost human-like movements and that disturbing face, Tom had no idea what he was witnessing. Tom didn't dare move or make a sound, worried any sudden motion might set this beast off. He watched as it slowly turned its misshapen head from side to side, as if sniffing the air or surveying its surroundings. That's when Tom reached slowly for his radio, intending to call for backup. But the second his hand moved, the creature immediately snapped to attention, hunkering down like an animal prepared to strike. A deep, gurgling growl rumbled from its throat. Tom stopped, with his hand extended towards his radio. He didn't know if he should try to scare it off, make a run for it, or just stay put. The creature took a few steps forward, its growls intensifying into a deafening roar. The sheer volume shook Tom's truck and made his ears ring. At that point, Tom's survival instincts kicked in, and he slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The truck's tires kicked up dirt and rocks as he veered off the road, crashing through bushes and brush to escape whatever that thing was. He looked in his rearview mirror to see the creature had stopped roaring and was now bounding off into the dense forest in astonishingly quick strides. With shaky hands, Tom grabbed his radio handset. "Unit 4 to dispatch. You're not going to believe this." After describing the nightmarish beast, dispatch quickly coordinated sending additional park rangers and county police to assist in a search and investigation. Within an hour, a team of 8 officers had assembled in the area where Tom first saw the creature. While some officers stayed behind to document the incident location and look for evidence, the rest moved out in groups to try and track the animal. Using the original footprint trail, Tom led one search team deeper into the forest west of Mineral Road. The heavy, unnatural footprints were unmistakable. Whatever had left them was clearly no ordinary creature. Every 30 yards, the officers used a GPS marker to keep track of their path, following the tracks nearly a mile from the original road before they seemed to vanish entirely. No matter how many ways they tried to pick the trail back up, it was simply gone. The dense foliage showed no signs of disturbance, no broken branches, no upturned soil, nothing. It was as if the creature had just disappeared. After an exhaustive overnight search, the teams regrouped at daybreak with no additional evidence to go on. The only physical proof that Tom's encounter wasn't just some delirious hallucination were the bizarre footprints they'd followed and the snapped foliage along Mineral Road where his truck went off-road. In the days and weeks following the bizarre incident, the search effort expanded to cover a widening radius around the initial sighting area. Rangers and police conducted grid sweeps through the dense forest terrain, meticulous in their efforts to locate any other signs of the creature's existence. Game cameras were deployed at dozens of locations and kept a constant vigil. Passive hair traps were set up in the hopes of catching a precious sample for DNA analysis. At night, teams would patrol with thermal imaging equipment and high-powered lighting, searching for any abnormal heat signatures or movement. Despite everyone's best efforts, no new evidence turned up. Whatever Tom encountered that night, it appeared to have simply vanished back into the unforgiving wilderness without a trace. The lack of conclusive proof began sowing seeds of doubt and division among the search teams. A few questioned if Tom might have just made some sort of mistake, but those closest to him dismissed that idea entirely. They knew Tom to be an honest, serious veteran ranger who wouldn't mistake fiction for fact. If he said he saw something, he undoubtedly did. Others speculated it must have been someone's exotic pet escaped into the wild, or perhaps a skinny bear suffering from mange or illness that could explain its gaunt, sickly appearance. A handful admitted feeling uneasy and began giving credence to the idea of an unknown creature roaming these remote forest lands. As for Tom himself, he stood firmly by his original account, adamant about the bizarre details that could match no known animal, the disturbing blend of a human-like posture, but with exaggerated animalistic features like that snout filled with jagged fangs. After 3 weeks, pressure from county officials forced the search to be called off. A lack of any new findings or eyewitness reports made continuing the operation fiscally unsustainable, they argued. Law enforcement and park services chalked it up to an unresolved mystery and seemingly put the matter to rest. While most have let the creature sighting fade from memory, Tom still receives phone calls, emails, even letters from people across the region sharing their own stories of unusual sightings or encounters in these backwoods areas, documented reports that had been dismissed or forgotten. Could they all be linked? Tom wondered. Today, when he patrols the remote trails and back roads of Shawnee Forest, Tom keeps an open mind and stays ever vigilant. The woods may appear calm and pristine, but he knows something else could be lurking out there, just waiting. Perhaps one day he'll find more evidence to get to the bottom of what roams these lands, or perhaps some secrets are better left undisturbed. In the spring of 2006, when I was about 12, my dad and I took a road trip to Denver, Colorado to visit my grandma for a few weeks. We were originally going to fly, but my dad figured it would be a cool experience to drive so we could enjoy the sights and sounds along the way and get some fresh air. It would also be good to have our own car there. We lived in northern Nevada, so it was about a 15-hour ride to Denver. We packed the car and headed out on a weekend in early April. The ride was kind of boring at first. I spent most of my time playing my Game Boy Advance while Dad drove. We stopped by local restaurants, took some photos, and even stopped to relax for a bit at some hot sulfur springs. Then, once we got further into Colorado, Dad took one of the more scenic routes. He decided to drive along Peak to Peak Highway, a road that is a few miles north of Denver. The road is about 30 or 40 miles long, something like that. We would check it out and then continue down to Denver after. It was beautiful out there. The trees, the mountain ranges, and the cool air. We had gotten there a little late, and before we knew it, it was already nighttime. The road is in the middle of the mountains and doesn't have any lights. Dad had to rely solely on our headlights to see where we were going. It got pretty dark out there, and we couldn't drive very fast. And there weren't really any other cars out this late on the highway. There were 2 or 3 we passed when it was light out, but once it got dark, we maybe saw one. My dad was pretty tired from the drive, and we didn't have any signal on the radio, so he asked me to talk to him to keep him awake. I started asking him a bunch of random questions about Grandma and what it was like growing up. We talked for a bit and were deep in conversation when suddenly I thought I could make out a figure far in the distance, but I wasn't sure. As we got closer, I started to see something becoming more visible. It was standing in the middle of the road with its hand straight out in front of it. I yelled to my dad a bunch of times to stop. I was panicking, and he finally braked. That's when we finally saw it. The creature had huge, hairy hands with long fingernails like claws. It was maybe 8 or 9 feet tall and was standing on 2 legs. It was hairy, but not completely. I could see its muscular gray skin beneath its fur. I couldn't make out the face. Its hand was still up and in the way, but its legs were like a dog's, but the feet were longer, with long nails like its hands. It lowered its hand, and we saw that it had a face like a wolf's, with yellow, piercing eyes. And it was snarling at us. My dad and I were frozen and couldn't get our words out. This thing was just staring us down. Finally, it moved and took a few steps towards us. This snapped Dad out of it. He put the car in reverse, and after he got a bit of distance from it, he turned the car around and sped away in the direction we had come from. I was terrified. I asked Dad over and over what was that, but he just kept telling me to calm down, to relax. But I started to freak out even more. Outside my dad's window, I could see it running right alongside us. We were speeding down the road, but this thing was keeping up with us like it was nothing. I yelled and told Dad that it was right next to us to go faster. He didn't look over and stayed focused on driving, but he told me to grab the roof handle above my seat and to hold on, and slammed the gas pedal to the floor. I closed my eyes and started praying. We just drove and drove for I don't know how long. Then I finally felt the car start to slow down, and Dad told me to open my eyes. We hadn't realized that we had lost the creature, but it was gone. We reached Grandma's in the early morning, but my dad told me not to mention anything about what we had seen. The experience shook both pretty badly. My dad and I would talk about it with each other, reading stories online and trying to figure out what we had seen. We debated if maybe all we saw was a bear, but we both knew that made no sense. The speed this thing ran at, and on 2 legs, didn't make sense. Dad always reminded me not to mention this story to anyone, afraid that people might think we were both crazy. But I felt like I had to share this story with you. We saw the dog man, and letting you know he exists might help you someday too. I came across your channel while doing some paranormal research on things that have happened to me recently. It is both terrifying and comforting to know that a lot of other people in the world have had similar occurrences to mine. After binging your channel to find cases like my own, I figured it's only fair that I contribute to the channel and share what happened to me. Maybe this will help someone else make sense of their own paranormal occurrence. I'm a general contractor. I started in construction after high school and worked my way up over the years. I'm no master at anything in particular, but I can build just about anything after years of working on different jobs. I started up my own company 7 years ago. Every contractor has a few weird stories. Any job that involves working with the public, especially in their homes, is bound to expose you to strange situations, but few contractors have stories bordering on the paranormal. Lucky me. It started out normal. I was hired to install a new septic tank for a young couple who just bought their first home. This was before housing prices skyrocketed, but they were still very budget conscious. The place was an old, turn-of-the-century farmhouse that was in bad shape. They bought the old house thinking they could use the money that they saved to fix it up. I've seen this happen a lot with younger people. Trendy social media videos and HGTV make people think that they can buy a fixer-upper and make it their own. They quickly realize that it takes more than good intentions to do major renovations. It pissed me off at first. I felt insulted that so many kids thought my job was so easy that they could do it without training. But then I realized how much money I was making when they found out they bit off more than they could chew. So I made my peace with it. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Creepy old farmhouse equals standard ghost encounter. But I never actually stepped foot inside the house. I was digging in the backyard to install the septic tank when I made an unfortunate discovery. Bones, and a lot of them. 9 times out of 10 when you dig up a bone, it belongs to an animal. But if I'm ever in doubt, I call the police and report it immediately. It is illegal to continue to dig at a site that may have human remains, and I don't make it a habit of risking my contractor license. The cops came. The forensic team confirmed the bones were human, and a special crime scene excavation team dug out the rest of the bones without disturbing their placement. Over 24 skeletons were arranged in 2 circles, one inside the other, surrounding a large elk skull in the center. The forensic team said the bones were a few hundred years old, at least early colonial times, but probably even earlier. It was clear that the burial site was not normal based on the arrangement of the bodies, and there were clear scrape marks on most of the neck bones. The forensic team said it indicated the victims had their throats slit. The whole site looked like some kind of sacrificial ritual. It did sort of bother me a bit, thinking about what had happened there. History is fascinating, but I was more concerned with them finishing up the excavation so I could get back to work on the septic tank and get paid. But that night, something strange happened. I knew it was a dream instantly, which is strange, because I've never had that happen before. I was in my own room, but there was no ceiling. I saw stars above me, but they were strange colors and moving around erratically. Then, an antlered figure appeared in the room and circled around me. He or it had markings all over his body. I don't know if they were tattoos or paint, but they twisted up and around his body in deliberate patterns. He wasn't showing any signs of aggression, but his presence was menacing. He just kept circling me. His face was stern but confused. Then, in the blink of an eye, he shoved me hard in the chest and knocked me back into bed. I woke up with a pain in my chest. I shrugged off the nightmare, but I had a red mark in the shape of a hand on my chest. That was a lot harder to shrug off. The entire time I drove to the work site, I had a feeling of uneasiness. When I got there, the owner came out to see me, and there was a moving truck in the driveway. He was clearly upset about something, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. He said he didn't want to dig the septic tank anymore and that he was planning on selling the place anyway. I asked him why he didn't call me. He just shook his head and said he was sorry and that he completely forgot about the septic tank. He looked really shaken up. I asked him if he had a nightmare. His eyes went wide, but he tried to play it off. We stood there for a minute in silence. I could tell he wanted to say something but couldn't. I would have left it at that, but I noticed a bruise around his arm, like someone had grabbed him roughly. He noticed me staring at his arm. "Did you see him?" he asked me. "Yeah," I responded. I unbuttoned my shirt enough to show him the handprint on my chest. He looked astonished and then oddly relieved. We didn't say anything else after that. He just nodded to me and I left. Part of me wanted to ask for details to compare his dream to mine, but I thought it best to let sleeping dogs lie. It might be a little anticlimactic, but the kid clearly didn't want to talk about it.